Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnis Luks here at the Freedom Forum, and I'd like to welcome Yves Potvin from Canada. Welcome, Yves.
Good morning.
No worries. I understand the weather's a little bit chilly over there.
It's warming up, but the warming up you might think of may not be the warming up. It's not as cold as it normally is, but it definitely not as warm as your place.
No, I understand it was what, minus 16 or something overnight the other night, minus
Minus
19.
19 we got up to in one area there,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
north, not way north,
Mm.
just a little bit north from us.
Yeah, that's incredible. This is the eastern side of Canada, ladies and gentlemen. Minus 16, minus 19. We live in the southern parts of South Australia, and north of us is the desert. And you head north, you head say 200 or 300 k's, and you're into very arid country. It's tough. There's no farming. Say 300, 400 k's north of us, there's no farming. It's if anything, what you'd do is you'd have so many stock per square kilometre because it's just there's nothing to really even feed them. And yesterday 30 roughly, today 30, not minus 16, and tomorrow 40. So there you go, a variance of 59 degrees, a variance of 59 degrees, and people accommodate that. We do. We're going to, and we're not sitting under the air conditioner, but we will sit in the shade, and we won't necessarily be out producing. We'll work in the morning, work in the evening, but the heat of the day. I think the Mediterraneans have got the right idea, a bit of a siesta, to stay out the sting of the tail and avoid it. Yeah, so it is very interesting. The just the difference of climate that is around the world, and we really it was interesting. I was talking to another bloke from Canada, and the time difference at one stage was 12 hours. We had 12 hours time difference, and because they were reasonably north and we were reasonably south, that put us diagonally opposite the other side of the world, and we were having a communication. So really beautiful things are going on with the sense that I can talk to Eve in Canada, and this is live. His afternoon, my morning, and we can communicate and hold a line of communication open. And this is just simply in our homes. So it's beautiful what technology is giving us. It really is opening up a whole new world, a world of abundance, and that brings us to our subject for today, which is the same subject from last week, but we want to continue on with a slightly different approach: global governance versus Douglas social credit. Now, I just want to cut across to this website here, and it's in regard to Lord Acton, a quote that he's attributed to have said: "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority, still more when you superadd the tendency of the certainty of corruption by authority." So coming back to the first sentence, power tends to corrupt, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's a very, very important, if you like, observation of the nature of human beings. The actual natural tendency of humans to act in this way. So to me, based on that observation, and I believe he's accurate. I believe he is profoundly accurate. That the likes of the last 100 years, the despotic leaders that most nations have been absolutely corrupted. They are totally corruptible, and at times, if you like, they are vicious and brutal to the regimes that they control. And this corruption, to me, is a demonstration. This cruelty to their own people is a demonstration of how this truth, this natural law, works. That they become totally consumed with power. So when we talk about global governance versus Douglas social credit, what we're looking at is we're looking at something that actually undoes power. It takes power away from an individual who's a despot and places it in the hands of many individuals. And that is, if you like, our subject for today, our consideration of what Douglas social credit is about. It's not only finance, but it's also the responsible vote. It's to do with elections. It's to do with accountability, a just amount of taxation. It's to do with relationships with the community that are around us. It really is a very, very deep, profound subject, and we're trying to do it justice by bringing parts of it up for discussion. Yves, your thoughts?
Yeah, I always think about Mrs. Gilberte Côté Mercier.
Hmm.
She was our director for quite a few years. Worked with Mr. Event for quite a few years to build a movement.
Hmm.
And she always said, science and technology, you could maybe compare that to intelligence. So science and technology, intelligence, without the love of God or your neighbor,
Hmm.
leads to ignorance. So it doesn't matter how smart you are.
Yeah.
The intelligence that you may have, if you don't use it for the right thing, will lead to ignorance. It says right there, it leads to ignorance. And we can see it now. Yeah, they have the money power.
Hmm.
They're intelligent in that way. They can steal without you knowing. That's their intelligence.
Hmm.
But there are people like Clifford U. Douglas, who was very intelligent. He was above all those guys. And he invented social credit in a way that it could help people. It
Hmm.
could help your neighbor.
Hmm.
So that's the kind of science and technology that Clifford U. Douglas brought to us by making it the right way to bring out science and technology, knowledge, intelligence. That is the right kind of those systems are the right kind. The way Mr. Douglas did it
That's beautifully
by
put.
bringing out love into it.
That's beautifully, beautifully put. What you're saying, Eve, is that there's a moral or an ethical disposition placed on the if you like the intellect, and that's your love for your fellow man, and not an attempt to dominate or exploit the cunning, the shrewd, the manipulative, not trying to exploit your fellow man, but to actually do good. And if you like, we talk about the financial system, we talk about the cultural inheritance, and that, in my view, has been actually pilfered away. It's been stolen, and global governance is the tool, is the end result, is the objective of these people who have actually stolen the cultural inheritance. So we've got to come back and look at, well, okay, if that's where we're heading towards, and we don't want global governance, how do we actually bring about something that's not global governance, but the opposite to it? And that to me is very, very important. Douglas talked about the national dividend, the consumer price subsidy, consumer price discount. What this is it's a financial mechanism. Just talk about that one, the finance, for a second. It's a financial mechanism where essentially the consumer has the opportunity to vote on a continual basis, and that in that voting he's using his financial vote to vote for or against things. Now that financial vote can be in the form of, you need a bridge built. So when you actually physically vote for a candidate in the election, the candidate says we need the bridge, and on the basis of this need as a community, we need to actually just work together and build this bridge. And you would exercise your responsibility and accountability by voting for the candidate, and then on the basis that the bridge is a project that needs to be secured, then it would come back to you to actually, well, how are you going to support that building of the bridge? And if the financial system is only through credit creation instead of the national dividend, you'd have nothing. But with the national dividend, you can exercise your financial vote and direct funds towards the building of the bridge. And that to me is most profound. It's a completely different way of doing things. That the electoral vote, the political vote, would become incorporated within the financial vote. And so you would be continuously voting. Every day you went down, you wanted some organic milk instead of other milk. You were voting every day. You were voting for the organic milk, and so you choose that. You wanted this type of car. It could be an electric battery car. You wanted that type of car, and so you vote by purchasing that. It doesn't need subsidy. It doesn't need anything. It stands on its own feet. I want to be sustainable. I want to be environmentally responsible, and so on that basis, you vote for these things. That's why the national dividend is most profound. That's why the political vote, the responsible political vote, and these are just mechanisms. That's all they are. Mechanisms that place the power back into the hands of the individual, not world government, where the power is exercised by corruptible man, but the power is handed back to the individual. It's a devolution of power. It is an entirely different way of thinking. And I think we really need to consider, we need to reconsider the direction we're going, because I believe we're heading clearly in the wrong direction. Eve.
The problem is, Arnis, is we're not allowed to vote. We've lost that freedom too.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we supposedly go vote at the polls,
Mm-hmm.
the people that are supposed to be voted in are not there. Because the government behind the government is the one that runs the country, the world. So when we go vote for a party or a representative of a candidate or something like this, we're not really voting. We're not really allowed to participate in who's going to make the decision. The true rulers of this world are behind the scenes, so we don't have any choice. We're not going to accomplish anything by going to vote, even if you have the most ardent candidate that wants to establish even social credit.
Mm-hmm.
If the people are not educated enough, you won't get in. You won't be. So we're stuck as far as voting, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
We're really stuck
Mm-hmm.
because the people that are supposed to be running the country are not there. They put their little pawns in place.
Mm-hmm.
That those guys, we can maybe play with them.
Yeah.
And but the decisions is going to come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Our government is not the government that is supposed to run the country. The government behind the government is the one that runs the country.
Yeah.
When you agree, Arnis?
I do, Eve. I think you've only got to place yourself in a position of wanting to build a bridge. You've only got to consider, okay, you're a community, you want to build a bridge. Who's the first person you contact? It's the banker. It's actually to issue the credit, which is in the form of a debt, in order to build the bridge. And if you can't achieve agreement with the banker, then it's dead in the water from the very start. And yet, this is the important point. Once the credit has been issued, then the community can engage in the construction and development of the bridge. So it's sort of like saying that you've got a stoplight in front of you and there's nothing else around. All the materials are there, all the technical people are there, all the know-how is there, the skills are there, everything is there, but this stoplight says no, you can't go. And this stoplight, of course, is the existing financial system, the power behind government. Going back to what Lord Acton said, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's most profound. And so what we've got to consider is that in Douglas's proposal, he places that power back into the hands of the individual. He places the financial power, the what they call economic democracy. He places it back in the hands of the individual so that the community can decide for themselves. Not the banker, the community. We're going to build this bridge. How are we going to do it? Well, we need an engineer. We need a civil engineer. We need a mechanical engineer. We need a planner. We need someone who's going to understand the logistics of it. We need workers. We need machinery. We need a steel foundry. We probably need a coal deposit to power the electricity, to power the steel foundry and things like that. Okay, all of these things become part of the building blocks of executing the construction of the bridge. But the thing is, it's all possible if you can control through your own mechanisms, your own agreement as a community. We're going to do this. But when you have global governance through banks, through central banks, through banks of international settlement, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, you've got centralised control. Nothing happens without their go-ahead. They are the stoplight. And as we're watching our, if you like, our communities be deconstructed, our real social credit, our real, if you like, mutual love and cooperation, we're watching it be deconstructed through the financial system, the insolvency of our primary producers, of our industry, the actual shutting down of our industry and handed to third world countries, the imbalance of exporting all of the raw materials of our own nation to be manufactured across in third world nations and then brought back here as finished products. These are all things that we're capable of doing ourselves. As Australians, as Canadians, as Americans, as English, New Zealanders, the free world, we can do these things, but the stoplight's there, and it stops us from doing it because it imposes policy not only on us as a community, but certainly on our governments. And the political party system was designed to undo our governmental structure, our constitutional systems. It was designed to undo it, and we really need to start looking at how do we shore this up? How do we actually hold it together? Because with what's going on south of your border, Eve, with what's going on, to me, there's the seeds of civil war there, and this needs to be undone. And the only way to undo it is to recognise we've got to turn away and go another way. We've got to turn away from this, which is going to be the clash of opposites, Marxist revolution. We've got to turn away and say, okay, how do communities actually work? How are civilizations built up? How are they undone? And what can we do to stop the undoing? And of course, this is what we're watching. This is what we're watching in front of our eyes, and we need to actually make a deliberate choice of, I say, Douglas social credit. You can call it Christianity. You can call it devolution, adhering to natural law. These to me are all the same thing. They're all part and parcel of the same thing, of placing power back in the hands of individuals instead of power in the hands of bureaucracies or global governance or central bankers. Eve.
The creation of money has to come from the people.
Yeah.
It has to come from the representative of the people, which is our government. Today I was picking up my car, so I had to take the bus to get there, and I stopped at the university. We have a large university here in Guelph, and it's a city. It's a university town, and I stopped in between transfers, and I went into where they wait for the bus. It's like a study area, and you see these hundreds of students sitting down and looking at their computer, working on their computer, and so on and so forth. And I think that's where you have to start attacking some of the thinking that has been going on. You have people with computers, they have a biology class, you see pictures and everything else. These poor people are going to go to school, and at the end there is nothing for them. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a lady called me to sell me a car, and she's very nice. And I told her about social credit. We got into the subject because everything is not affordable, and so I told her how it worked, and she was absolutely amazing. She was only I think she was only about 28 years old, and she understood. So wow, she said she'd never heard a story like that before. I've never heard it say that way. So maybe there's openings there in the university colleges and young people that gather around anybody, but I'm thinking of the universities because they're supposedly well educated, and if you can open up that can you know make them think a little further.
Hmm.
uh, I don't know if you have to scare them or if you have to force them. Everybody's so busy.
Hmm.
I got to take the bus. I'm sorry, sir. I haven't got the time. So when do you have the time?
Hmm.
Can I go see at your play? You can't. It's there or nothing.
Yeah.
So you have to get these young people educated, even if you give them a hint or some kind of a help to think about their future. This is what's going to happen. I've got a grandson. I've got a granddaughter. They went to college, universities. They have nothing at the end. They're working in factories. They're working. So, I mean, it's hard to explain, but I think that if we can pass the word of think about your future and think about what you're going to have at the end of that schooling. You're going to have 25 years of debt to
Hmm.
pay before you can even start life.
Hmm.
I think it's the most awful thing. It's murderous. It's
Enslaving.
so we have to educate these people
Hmm.
and somehow. And I felt like maybe I should go back there, take the bus, and stop at that place and see if I can get some students' attention
Yeah.
to start a conversation, to start a. I don't want to start a revolution. I just want to start a discussion on how we can correct the financial system before it's too late.
Hmm. I
I
think
think that
the
if we,
Yeah, I think the biggest ticket there, and I think Douglas warned about it, Eve, is that the institutions are generally financed by big business or government, and therefore the institutions, in my view, will never provide an answer. And so I think the opportunity there is to educate. I agree, and that to me is what this forum is about. It's an opportunity to educate. It's an opportunity to instill a different thought pattern or a thought process, because the if you like the global governance centralization of power, placing the if you like the credit creation power in the hands of government only makes government a bigger tyranny. The the proposal by Douglas was a national credit authority separate from government, so that government couldn't touch it. Similar to, if you like, the authority for weights and measures. Weights and measures. It's not something that government can play with. They can't play with the pound or the kilo. It is what it is, and that's it. And so it is with the financial economic system, that what the community produces is measurable. It's called gross domestic product. What is it that the actual community produces? What are the actual assets of the community? And they include roads, schools, power generation, sewerage systems, water systems, homes, highways, public offices, all these sorts of things. What are the real assets? That, again, is measurable. And on the basis of what industry, gross domestic product, produces and what it's capable of producing, which is a different thing altogether. Because what a community industry could do is you ask industry, and they would easily increase production if the market was there. All of them, in fact, I would suggest, have the potential. And so we've got to come back and say, well, what is actually being produced by industry? Can we purchase it? We're not actually in equilibrium because we can't purchase it. There is a disequilibrium. Wages and dividends is an insufficiency. And so because there's a constant stream of production coming off industry, There needs to be a measured constant stream of wages and dividend, and based on that anomaly, then there also needs to be a measured dividend placed back into the hands, a dividend placed back in the hands of the community, so that it can be in equilibrium. The scales, instead of them progressively imposing debt, the scales can be brought back where there's sufficient spending power to liquidate what the community produces. And that's what the national dividend is about. That's what the National Credit Authority is about, holding it in equilibrium so that the community can buy what the community makes. And if they decide they want to build a bridge, then they can issue the credits so that the bridge can be constructed, so that there's actually an increment of production to take into account the bridge. But once the bridge is built, then it comes back down. So it's a dynamic relationship. That's the National Credit Authority, not in the hands of government, because in the hands of government, we've got this Lord Acton statement again. In the hands of government, too much power. You've got to put it back into the hands of the individual. Devolution of power. If locals can do it, then locals should do it. And to me, the opportunity with the students is there to work these issues through, if you like, in their mind, but then place them out into the hands of real demonstrations of it and say, well, okay, let's just try and build this park bench. Can we build a park bench? Yes, we can. Well, how do you do it? Well, I need someone to cut the wood, and I need someone who's going to supply me with the wood, and I need some fuel to run the generator and run the power equipment, and I need some nails, or I need some bolts, I need a bit of concrete. And you work all those things through in the exercise, and you do it in real terms, and then you look at it and you say, well, how much was paid in wages? So much, but how much did the bench cost? And then you say, oh, of course, it's in disequilibrium, it's not balanced out. So if we issue this credit to build the park bench and bring it back to equilibrium, you can see that the increase, the new issue of credit responds to the building of the park bench, and then it can come back down again. And to me, it's demonstratable every single day. Every day that you want to put a fence up on your boundary of your block. Every day that you want to get your car repaired. You know, you were saying you wanted your car repaired. Well, obviously, there's an increased demand for servicing of your car. Well, then there should be a corresponding increased issue of credits to cover that, so that the mechanic who's doing the work, the technician, they can be paid. And that's what it's about. It's constantly adjusting and monitoring that National Credit Authority, not static. And so the government's function is to provide the environment that this can work. It's not the government function to control and administer this. It's the National Credit Authority, like weights and measures, has to do it itself. It has to be autonomous and if you like, self-sustaining. And the community will soon see if the National Credit Authority is acting out of whack. They'll soon see it, because things that want to be done won't be able to be done because there won't be an issue of new credits. So they can respond to it straight away and politically pull them back into line. It really is a devolution of power. It bringing power back to the individual, and that's what Douglas social credit is about. It's not just finance. It's actually looking at the workings of communities, the workings of society, and building up social cohesion, building up the culture. That is the real social credit. That is what Douglas was referring to in Douglas social credit. Communities, mutual love and cooperation. What a beautiful, vivid picture we've drawn together, Yves. We're 29 minutes, Yves. Are your closing thoughts, please?
Yeah, we've been denied our inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
We've been denied our inheritance. I was saying that to somebody today, a cashier
Mm-hmm.
at the grocery store. She says, yeah, she says, we've been, yeah, you don't have time to talk to a cashier. There are people waiting behind.
Mm-hmm.
But I bring up these words because I want to start a conversation. Maybe there is time.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that we we have to talk. We have to talk to those people. I think God will lead the way. He will take care of where we're going. And
Mhm.
if there's something to talk about with somebody, it'll happen.
Mhm.
I got a, you can say I got a big mouth, but I like to talk to people.
Mhm.
And for the first time in about 25, 30 years,
Mhm.
I've been on a bus,
Mhm.
a city bus.
Mhm.
I never used the bus. But anyway, it was interesting. People sitting there, and you feel like talking to them. They have their own little comments and all that. So you feel like starting a conversation. So it's not like if people don't want to talk to you, they're all there to make friends or look for somebody. Or some of them are on their phone, texting and everything else. But there's always an opportunity to start something. And when you bring out something like, yeah, you've been denied your inheritance.
Mhm.
What do you mean? That opens up a conversation. The person goes, what are you talking about? Well, your inheritance. We've built this country for 400 years,
Mhm.
and it's wealthy. It's got a real wealth,
Mhm.
but the money is just not there.
Yeah.
We've been denied our inheritance. We should get something. I mean, the big banks own everything. They didn't build anything. They
No.
didn't put two bricks together.
No.
So there's always, yeah, I never thought of that. And you can start a conversation, and maybe out of that, other people will ask questions. You have a leaflet now. You can talk about it,
Mhm.
or you can go on our website or on
Mhm.
your website, and so these are things that can happen, and I'm sure it'll happen. I'm going to ask you after this meeting, how do you advertise your website?
Mhm.
So we have websites. I've seen my views there. There's not too many yet, but there are, maybe I can have a card. You can advertise the site.
Mhm.
Go on there. There's some good comments on there
Mhm.
that you can find out all kinds of stuff. Um, so those are basically my closing comments is to spread the good news.
Yeah.
Spread the good news that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
It is there. It
Yeah.
is. It is going to happen.
Yeah. A solution. Yeah. That's right. Exactly right, Eve. There is a solution to what's going on, the quandary of the world, and I find it beautiful, Douglas's proposal, because what it does is it actually labour and capital being essentially polarized against each other. In actual fact, what it does is it brings them together. It finds a solution in Douglas Social Credit. The movie, The North and the South, it was the same thing. Industry, someone was running industry and someone was the worker, and they were both had this union capitalist position. Douglas Social Credit resolves this, if you like, this dialectics. It resolves it so that you can include both and I think it was beautifully put. Resolution. We need government. We need freedom. Limited constitutional government gives us government and freedom. Limited constitutional government. It resolves the conflict. So what we've got to do is resolve the conflict between Labor and capital, or vice versa, whatever they were. Labor and capital. We've got to resolve the conflict and find resolution. Capitalism is not the answer. Communism or socialism is not the answer. Douglas Social Credit resolves this. We work as communities, we work together. The division of labour brought us together, working and building up our infrastructure. Technological advances, steam energy, electrical energy, automation, advanced control, robotics, all these things. The labour component, man is only a catalyst now. He's not a source of energy. Solar energy is the source of energy, and that's where we are. Labour and capital, bringing them together in Douglas Social Credit, both and. Beautifully put. Thanks very much for today, Eve. It's been a very good forum, and always look forward to it. Take care, ladies and gentlemen.
Work for freedom.
We work for freedom. That's right.